It is June
All right.
1st.
Good morning. June 1st, 2007.
Good morning, Brandon.
We're going to be interviewing the originators of the Cone Empire, and we're going to start off. We got a story to tell. We came up with a list yesterday, and number one, a story of Dad's car to the beach.
Oh, your father's car. Old
Oh,
Silver.
yeah, okay, yeah.
Old Silver
Okay,
was
Old
called.
Silver, yeah, Old Silver. Morris Casey and I, my best friend I guess I ever had, and the funniest guy that made everybody laugh. Anyway, getting back to the story, my father was a pipe fitter and then also later a businessman, had several grocery stores in his lifetime and movie theaters later on before he died. Anyway, Dad had a great personality and good person, good Christian man, but he had a drinking problem, and it would, if he had one drink, he couldn't stop, and I mean, what I mean I couldn't stop, he would stay drunk for 20, 30 days, and he'd get sober, and then he would he'd go back to church, be in the choir, and brotherhood, and lived a good 5 years without a drink, and we were all so happy then. But anyway, he was superintendent over the pipe fitters at this chemical company, Dow Chemical, for construction. And he had this silver, I guess like a van.
Panel truck.
Panel truck.
Yeah.
And he would do plumbing jobs on the side at that times. Anyway, he let me and Morris have it one day, and so we went to Bryan Beach. And of course, Morris and I had a few little toddies ourselves, and we were, and I was driving, and we'd go back and forth, and over the sand dunes and everything. All of a sudden, it tipped over. It tipped over on its side, and then rolled. Of course, back in those days, you didn't have seat belts, but we weren't hurt. And anyway, when it finally ended up back up, right side, there were pieces of metal sticking out the front of it. I mean, through the roof. So we came back and we said, "What we're going to do?" I said that we'll just park it and leave, and then we'll later when Daddy said, "You know, I'll come up and you and I'll say, what in the world happened to your old Silver here, Dad?" And he said, "I just can't figure that out." I said, "Now, come on now, Dad. You sure now you didn't turn that thing over?" And I don't think so. No, I didn't do that, son. No, I can't figure it out. I just cannot figure it. Anyway, he went to his grave, and we never told him the story.
Wow.
And that's Old Silver story.
And that was very bad.
It was bad.
It is bad. You ought to be ashamed.
When I get to heaven, I'm going to apologize to him, because he was the greatest father to ever live.
That's pretty good. All right. Let's see. We got another one. Redbud, no rent. So what I wrote down,
yeah,
I'm not sure.
Yeah, it was this Oriental that had a big job at Shintech.
He lived over on Forest Drive.
He lived on Forest Drive, and we had loaned some money to Mr. Hitchens, and he was working for me at the time. He was a chemical engineer at Dow Chemical and had his degree, but he had a master's degree, in fact. But he had a drinking problem too,
and his nose ran all the time.
His nose ran all the time. He never wiped it. He would just roll, and we'd hand him handkerchiefs and Kleenex, but we'd always have to do it, and especially when we'd have pictures taken, because he was one of our employees. In fact, I was building homes at the time, he and Shine Kennedy, and they were running the jobs, and I was furnishing the management and the money. And so, and Nonie was working with them too. In fact, I had so many businesses going in those days, I didn't hardly have time to even check with them. But Nonie ran the jobs really herself. Isn't that right, Nonie?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Anyway, so Roger he just never could make his payments and so forth. So finally, he just gave the house back to me, and so it became a rent house on Forest Drive. I had this fellow from Shintech that was, and he was in charge of Shintech, and he was always late on his rent, always late on his rent. So one day, I went by there, and the garage door, he was in the garage door, so I put on my brakes, stopped, walked over, and I said, well, you got my rent money? No, and I need some repairs done. And I said, well, I'm not doing repairs until you start paying your rent on time. But right now, I'm going to push this button. Had a button there on the two-car garage. It would go up and down by itself if you push the button to stop. I pushed the button. The garage door came down, and I walked over, and I beat the hell out of him. And so he said, "Oh, you're in trouble now, old Cone." Said, "I'm going to own everything you own." And I said, "Well, not after I hit you a few more times, but I'll tell you what happened to you is that if you don't come and pay me by dark tonight, I'm going to come over and give you some more of this, and it's going to be worse. Might even bring my boys." And so, anyway.
Little bit.
Huh?
And they were little teenagers then.
No, I said they were teenagers, but he didn't know the difference. So, anyway, I said, "There's no way that," he said, I said that what happened to you is you fell. That's where all the damage is done to your face right now. So I said that that's your word against mine, and I've got proof that you hadn't paid me in 4 months. So be out of here also and come over and pay me on Redbud. And this was on Forest Drive that Hitchens' house was. So anyway, make a long story short, he came over and paid me, and also he moved that night. But that was the story of the Shintake.
But there's a little bit more to it.
Okay, all right, okay, all right.
Clyde usually did never go around beating up people, even though this sounds like he did. And he came home after he beat up that man, which he did beat him up there pretty bad. And he said, "Oh, Nonie, I've done the worst thing." He said, "I'm so ashamed." He said, "Oh, it's awful, it's awful." And he talked about how he beat up this fella. And anyway, to make it a little shorter, we had to pay for all his furniture in his house and put it in storage for him. And we had to pay for all of that. So he got us in a way too. But he did pay his rent, and then he finally moved.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, that was that. But now all things now are always about me fighting. That's not true, because Max Hagan and I had a bunch of rent houses over behind where the Clyde Cone office is right now, over on Lewis Street. Named after Joe Louis, the great boxer. So we had this one fellow that weighed about 350 pounds. He was a black man, and his name was Sammy. So one day we went by over there. He was 2 months behind his rent, and so Max and I walked up, and so he was sitting there on the front porch and had a rifle sitting on his lap. So we walked up, and so I said, "Okay, Sammy, we come for the rent. Are you going to have to leave?" Sammy's not leaving. And so I said, "What are you planning on doing with that gun?" He said, "I'm just protecting myself." So anyway, I looked at Max, and I was scared. I wasn't scared. That gun got me good. So Max said, "Sammy, if you don't leave today, and also, and if you don't put that gun back in the house, I'm going to take it and stick it up your ass." I thought, "Oh my God, we're dead right now." And so I thought, Max, I said later on, anyway, he started crying. And he said, I'm sorry. And I thought, my God, I guess it is a good defense is an offense. That's what Max used. Well, later on, I said to Max, I was scared. How in the world did you say, did you know that he was just going to shoot us right there? He said, I said, "I didn't know what else to do, Clyde. I was scared too." Anyway, we got rid of old Sammy. I don't know what happened to him, but he was a bugaroo.
All right.
I had a big job at Dow
Wait.
Chemical.
Oh no, that's good.
Okay.
Continue.
This was the day that Steve was born.
December the 14th.
Now, December 14th, 1951.
Yeah.
So anyway, we were having our annual Dow Chemical Christmas party, and I was master of ceremonies. In fact, there was a picture of me, and we can find it sometime. I was dressed in a pretty suit, and Bob Metcalf was handing me an award for being the greatest MC that ever lived that night. But anyway, Metcalf's gone now, and at that time I was in charge of the Marine Department at Dow Chemical, or the ships, barges, and and they went back and forth to Europe and East Coast and so et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, after I got through with my speech, well, Nonie had Steve that day at birth, and so I was leaving. I told her I wouldn't be there over about 20, 30 minutes for my speech, and I'd leave. And because she didn't want me to go to the party at all, but I had to because of my job. As walking out, my boss was Joe Gardner, and we had a bouncer that got drunk, and he's supposed to protect us, but he was beating up my boss, and he would hit him in this side and hit the left side and the right side, and blood was gushing from Gardner's mouth and nose. So I reached up. I just got out of the Marine Corps not too long ago, so I reached up and put a hug on him, started choking him, and he said, turn me loose, and I won't do anything. I'm sorry. And so anyway, I turned him loose. When he did, he was a professional boxer at one time. He turned around with that left hand. He hit me right in the mouth, and then it hit me about 3 more times. And I got up, and then I played on him, but the damage done. In fact, I lost nearly 4 or 5 of my teeth. I had to get me a partial plate over the thing. Anyway, I had a big old mouth, and I had bruises and black eye. So anyway, I came the next morning. But when I got there, I let Nonie tell the story from there.
Well, the night of the party, the big party out at Dow Chemical that Clyde was in charge of, and didn't come to the hospital to see me after I'd had my son, Steve, our first boy that we had. Anyway, to make it a little more dramatic for me, I was paralyzed for over 2 weeks after I had Steve, and I really wanted Clyde to come visit me. But, you know, he was so important he couldn't come because he had to do this party. Well, that night the nurses came in and said, boy, they really had a big party out of the Dow Chemical. The people,
Hurricane Club.
Yeah, the Hurricane Club. And they had a fight out there, and I understand one guy really got hit hard and even some teeth out and everything. And I said, what department did you say that was? And she said, oh, that was the Marine Department was having their Christmas party. And I said, oh, okay. And so in a little while, here comes Clyde walking in the hospital room. And he has not even shaved. And I said, well, how come you haven't shaved, Clyde? Well, I want to tell you something, Nonie. I said, you don't have to tell me. I know what happened. And I was not happy with him. And I said, good enough for you that you're hurting, because I'm hurting too. So that was his little story that he told. But we do have pictures of it if y'all ever look through the albums. And you see a picture of Papa, and he's standing there smiling, and he's got a big stick and award, and another man's giving him something. I think you even had your little cute hat on,
I can't remember
too,
that or not.
in it. Why, that's the night that Steve was born when you see that picture. Okay, Clyde.
Well, she described it pretty good. I know one thing, that I have never lived that down. She never has.
No.
Still not going to let me.
I'm not going to.
Been 55 years ago.
Let's see. Here's what I have written down. Sunday morning, Lewis Street, and
Oh, that was the one he told me
yeah,
about
Max
saying.
Hagen. Yeah, so we got that one. Let's see. Poker. You were playing poker. You went to get ice and never came back.
Oh,
Oh yeah, I was at the Marine base in San Diego,
it was
at
before
Miramar,
we ever knew each other.
and this was in latter part of 1945. I guess it was, yeah. It was about October,
It was in
November,
October.
December. Yeah, so it was about October, and every week we had a poker party, and each one of us had to go across the street. That's in our barracks there, and get ice and Cokes, and we had little little bottle, little bottle of hooch over there, of bourbon that we took drinks and while we played poker. So it was my turn to go across the street that night and get the ice and ice and Cokes for our drinks. So anyway, I got over there, I looked around, I saw this good-looking redhead out on the dance floor dancing, and she had a little.
You didn't know I was redhead.
Had there's where your red hair came from, Brenda.
Yes.
And anyway, I looked out on there and I saw this gal dancing, and I swear she had the most beautiful butt I'd ever seen in my life. I always was a butt man instead of a tit man. So I went out there and asked her to dance, and she said no. And so I came back over there a few minutes, and I went back in, and I said that I'm Clyde Cone, getting ready to be discharged from the Marine Corps pretty soon, and I'm from Texas. And she says, I can tell that by your Texas drawl. And so anyway, I said, well, how about a dance? And so she danced with me that time. Anyway, the boys never saw Clyde Cone at the waiting for me to bring back the ice and Cokes for the poker game, because I stayed there the rest of the night. And
what did you say to me on that first dance?
Oh yeah, on that first dance, I said, I'm going to marry you. And 3 months later,
we were married.
6 days after my discharge, which was December the 13th, 1946. January the 13th, 1946. Yeah. And then 6 days later, on the 19th of January, Nonie and I went over to Santa Ana, California, about an hour and a half, 2 hour drive, and we got married with, I guess, at Dubick and Boyd Dillard and Stuart Dunlap.
And Claire, his wife.
And Claire, his wife, so she later divorced him. He became a doctor, and
they all got out of the service with Clyde.
Yeah, then
they went with us.
Bud Williams was the only one, real close ones, that wasn't there, and he had gone back because he was engaged to get back to Oklahoma, who we later visited. And there's some more stories I'll tell you about Bud Williams. He married Enid from
Oklahoma.
From Cala. In fact, she was from Enid, Oklahoma, and they named it after the town she was born in.
That's
anyway, that's how I met Nonie. So we, like I say, that, and then about a month or two after we got married, well, we were calling each other almost every day, or I was calling her and sending her roses, and so she was still in school, and so she got on a train and came to Texas, and here we are. And we just celebrated. We'll be celebrating our 62nd anniversary on January the 19th next year. Not too far away, about 6-7 months away. That's how I met Miss Nonie Cone.
Yeah, that's how he met me. And I didn't know that his first name was Alonzo until the day we went up to get our marriage license. And of course we had to put our name out. Now I had told him that my name was Virginia Elizabeth, but everyone had always called me Nonie, and I liked the nickname, so I stuck with it. And I saw that when he wrote it, and I said, your name is Alonzo? I thought your name was Clyde. Well, the middle name was Clyde. And everybody in the service always called him Blackie because he was so dark, you know, from the sun and everything. So that was a big surprise to me, but I did marry him even though his name was Alonzo.
And back in those days, too, you know, you didn't
marry.
You didn't associate or marry black people or Mexicans.
Or Spanish people.
Or Spanish people, they call them Spanish. I don't know how, my father's name was Alonzo, I'm a junior.
Yeah.
And his father's name was Alfonso.
Yeah, but on his birth certificate they spell it Alonza with Z-A instead of Z-O.
A-L-O-N-Z-A. And right to this day, well, it's on my birth certificate, Alonza, but then of course our passport is Alonzo, A-L-O-N-Z-O.
They refused to put the A.
But anyway, we're always worried about that when we go overseas and have our passports. Nobody ever caught it though, did they?
No, they never said anything about it. But he went all through the service too as Alonzo.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I got looks like King's Furniture. King Furniture.
What now?
King's
Kingo. I don't know.
Oh, I know what it is. Frank Sinatra.
Oh, okay. Is that the one? Oh, yeah.
The guy
yeah.
that has
yeah,
furniture store.
Bender's Furniture.
Fingers.
Finger
yeah.
Furniture.
Finger furniture.
Yeah,
in
I
Houston.
remember that real well. I remember that one day that Nonie and I and George and Gene Sanders went to Finger Furniture so they could see us. It's probably the largest furniture store in the United
They
States.
were going to buy furniture.
They were going to buy
George and
furniture.
Gene. We went
So
with them.
when we got there, well, they've got this baseball, one of the greatest baseball paraphernalia. They got the Babe Ruth home run bat. They got his bat. They got Lou Gehrig's glove, and it's really a great thing to see if you ever go to Finger's Furniture. So I said, I don't care about looking at furniture. Y'all go ahead. I'm going to stay here. And so I signed in my name, Clyde Cone, and they have free donuts and free coffee. And this black girl, she showed me around, and then of course I was there, I guess, for a good 30 minutes or an hour. And so I said, well, I've seen everything here, and I really enjoyed it. And she said, be sure now and sign my, as I was leaving, be sure and sign my register. And I said, okay. So I signed register, and all of a sudden, I heard this voice, and before I turned around, Frank Sinatra is here. This was back in, I'd say in 1967 or 1968. And I said, Frank Sinatra's here. Anyway, I looked around, turned around, and there was Frank Sinatra. He had a bodyguard with him, north, south, east, and west. He had a blonde on each arm. And so I walked over and said, I'm Clyde Cone. And I just went through here and come sign in, and I'll show you all our paraphernalia here, because I know where it is. The girl doesn't know anything about it, because she didn't know nothing. And so we sat down. I showed it to him, because he said, "How did you know my name?" I said, "Well, I recognize your voice, but today's morning Chronicle." Well, back then it was the Post, Houston Post. Mm-hmm. I said that I read where you were in town because your father is in the hospital at Methodist Hospital.
Right.
And I said that
it was in the 50s.
I read that, and so anyway, and so we were sitting there having coffee and donuts, and so I said, by the way, now before you leave, I told him also at the same time, if you ever want real estate, you call Clyde Cone in Texas, because I'm the greatest real estate man that ever lived. And I know all about Texas and real estate. So anyway, I gave him my card, like I should have. And then I said that there's one thing before you go, Frank Sinatra, I want to see about one thing. I said, I was in the Marine Corps and overseas there. We had this Italian with us, and all he talked about, everything is Frank said this and Frank said that, and we'd all say, Frank who? And this went on, and he said, you know, Frank Sinatra, the one that I went to high school with. We were in high school together, best friend. And he said, what was his name? I said, Mafusi. He said, Richie? I said, yeah, Richie Mafusi. And he said, Lord, yeah, I can tell you stories you won't ever believe about me and Richie. He said, his family was in the 6th generation of the Gambino family, which is mafia, you know. So, anyway, of course, later in the paper and so forth, he always denied that he didn't know anybody in the mafia and so forth. And he always said he was in the mafia. But how did he know the Gambino family? Later on, in another story I'll tell you about me visiting, going to New York.
Tell it while you're...
I'll tell it while I'm here right now. And then, so, anyway, well, let me get, right now though, let me go back
to Fingers.
And to Fingers, because here came Nonie, because she always loved Frank Sinatra.
Yes,
and
I did.
George and Gene Center. I said that you dismiss Frank Sinatra. Oh, baloney, no way, he'd be here. And I said, go over there. And so first that black girl came up, and I said, did you see Frank Sinatra? And she said, I saw this man that you showed around and everything, had coffee with. I don't know who he is. I said, well, go over there, and right below my name, you'll see Frank Sinatra sign. And so anyway, George and all of them said, God, I'd love to know, especially Nonie. Boy,
Yeah.
she was sick.
Because I always went to see him when he was at Pacific Square in San Diego. On the weekends, we had all the big bands there in San Diego, and we would go to Pacific Square to go dancing. And Frank Sinatra was one of my favorite of all.
Anyway, so
I really was sorry I didn't get to see him again.
anyway, later on, the Dow Chemical sent me to New York on business. We had some problems up there on the ship, and so I was at this hotel, and so whenever I looked up to see if Richie Mafusi, was in that town, and it was either Brooklyn or one of those other little towns there close to Times Square. And I looked up and I called 2 or 3, and all of a sudden I got this one. There's a lot of Mafusis in there, Maffucci, really Italian name. And so I called, and this woman answered the phone, and I said, I'm Blackie Cone, and I was in the Marine Corps with Richie Mafusi, and I said that, is he there? She said, no, Richie's dead. I said, oh, I'm so sorry. Golly, I said, we had many good times and everything together, and so she said, where are you staying? I said, told her what hotel, I forget what it was. And so about 10 minutes or 5 or 10 minutes later, the phone rang, and I said, hello, and he said, who is this? I said, this is Blackie Cone. And back then, I said, always said Blackie Cone. I didn't say Clyde Cone, because that was what I'd been called out all the time overseas for 3 or 4 years. So anyway, he said, Blackie, this is Richie. I said, thought you were dead. He said, well, I am not dead. And so he said, I'll tell you what you do now. He said, oh, in about 30 minutes, go out to the front door there, and there'll be a black limousine come up, and I'll be in the black limousine, and they'll pick you up, and we'll go somewhere else. I said, well, great. And I said, what do you do, though, Richie, for a living? I remember that's the last time I ever talked to him. He said, oh, how about construction? I said, okay. You're in the construction business. Yeah, that's it. That's a good name for it, construction business. So anyway, I said it. So I went out there and waited. Here came the black limousine. There was a guy that was driving the limousine, but there's no Richie. I said, what happened to Richie? Where is he? He said to tell you that something came up real important in the construction business, and that he's taking care of it, but he'll contact you later. Never heard from him again. I don't know whether he got killed. I never called that other number again. I wish I had to see whatever happened, but she'd already told me once he was dead. Yeah. So naturally I met him. He was out, no doubt in my mind. I told Frank Sinatra the story, and he said, I can tell you what happened. Somebody got him, or you'd have heard from him. Anyway, and later, the only other time I had an encounter was later on with Frank Sinatra. Had Nonie and I and a whole bunch of couples, and in fact the children, the boys might have been with us, and they went every time where we went almost.
Yeah, we always took the kids.
And we were sitting there just eating dinner, and so I said to the waiter, I said, waiter, we'd like to have a good after-dinner drink. What do you suggest? He said, he named off some stuff. Anyway, this fellow walked over, and it was Frank Sinatra. And so he said, I'm Frank Sinatra. I said, yeah, I recognize you. And I said that, what do you recommend? He said,
what's a good
after-dinner drink? It's Sambuca. That's my favorite drink. And he said, try it. So anyway, they brought us Sambuca. We've been drinking Sambuca, an after-dinner drink, ever since. That's it. That's about the only 2 encounters I had with Frank Sinatra. What else we got there now?
No, I'll take a little intermission real quick.
Okay.
On the Dow Chemical funeral, yeah, Dr. Bartle and Oliver Bartle called me one day and said, Clyde, said, we want you, that's when I was still in the head of the Marine Department, we want you to go to a funeral in Humboldt, Texas. Now it's a large city. Back then it was way up north of Houston, but it's almost adjoining them now. But they said that one of our top executives died, and we want you to go and represent Dow Chemical. And so I said, okay, I'll do it. So they gave me a company car to go in. I went up there, and I got there about an hour, I guess, before the funeral. And I ate a big lunch there, and black-eyed peas and cornbread. It was a real good place to eat. And I went over in the funeral home and sat down, and I went to sleep. And I went to sleep. It was about 15, 20 minutes before the funeral started. So anyway, I dreamed while I was asleep, and I dreamed that my boss in Dow Chemical told this story, and it wasn't real funny, I remember that, but I laughed, and I just laughed out. I woke myself up laughing.
At the funeral.
And there, when I woke up, the funeral was going on, and the preacher was preaching the funeral. And I was sitting there next to all the family, who all knew, I knew all the family. And all of a sudden I thought, oh my God, what have I done? I woke up laughing while the funeral was going on. And so I thought, well, I'll just cry. So I started crying.
You put your hands over your
I put my hand over it. Oh, I really boo-hooed like it. I just couldn't handle it. And his son, who was, by the way, was a Texas Aggie, and he had a big job at Dow. Little E. Jack Turner, not E. Jack, but a little Jack Turner. He put his arm around me and said, oh, Clyde, I know you loved it. Because actually, I had gone over and turned him. He was dying of cancer, and I turned him several times before he died. And he and I were good friends. And we had the same boss, Joe Gardner, remember?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's why they chose me to go to the funeral. And so his son reached over and said, I know you love Dad. And so went like that. Anyway, I survived that, you know. I faked that deal about laughing. And so then we went and all got in our cars, and we had to drive from Humble back over to Houston, where he was buried. I forget the name.
And we had a big meal, and it was hot out.
And what was it?
We had a big meal.
Oh yeah,
it was real hot, and there was no air conditioning.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
In the place. But anyway, so then we went to the gravesite funeral, and so I remember Al Lauren, he was also at the funeral. I didn't know that, and he was one of Dow's top executives, and so. But you know how we do? They preach a short funeral, and graveside funeral, and then everybody went around and shook hands and so forth, and as you make the rounds. And so it's Al Larney and I had already shook hands once, and it's good to see you, Clyde. So we got there, we both stuck out our hands, and when we did, we said, well, we've already shook hands, so we just went like that, both of us, and our arms locked. And when we did, we both went around and around like this, and I fell in the grave. I fell in the grave, Martha. No kidding. That was the awfulest thing, Brennan. So they pulled me out of there. And then I got in the Dow Chemicals car, drove about 2 blocks, and I started laughing again. I thought, what in the world? Anyway, Dow Chemical never sent me to represent them again at a funeral. That was my funeral, my funeral story.
Yeah.
The Dow.
Okay. Well, I got here Morris Casey stories, or you could go to Nonie, Texas Fight.
Do both. Nonie, Texas Fight. Yeah. Jack Spruill and I were just inseparable there, and I'd go up every summer and spend maybe a month with my grandma Cone, but his daddy was over the railroad crew there, and so back in those days, as during the Depression, everybody was starving to death, but he was sort of, I guess, the richest guy in the little town of Nonie. And Jack Spruill and I, we were about, I guess, 12 years old, or maybe 13, and we were just inseparable. We played together every day and had a good time. But we got in an argument one day, and I know that Orrin Williams and Pete Williams and Oris, my cousins, they were egging us on there, and we got in an argument one day, and so we ended up with a fist fight. And that fist fight, it was one of the biggest fist fights that they'd ever seen. And all those little codgers there, they were egging us on too. And we fought and fought. We finally both just fought till we just fell to the ground. And we got up, huh?
From one side of Nonie to the
Yeah,
other.
we fought all over that little old town. And of course they really loved it. This is the greatest fight they'd ever seen, fist fight. And I remember Jack Spruill had a donkey, and we both got on his donkey. We both had we had black eyes, and we got on that donkey and rode to his house together. Anyway, when his mother saw us, she said, "That's the awfulest thing. You better go home to your grandmother, Junior." And so that's what everybody called me, Junior, in those days. And so I know that all my cousins, Oris and Pete and Orrin, told Nonie and Mother and Daddy every time we get together, they'd talk about the biggest fight they ever had in Nonie, Texas. It was Jack Spruill and Clyde and Junior Cone. Anyway, that's a story on that. What else you got?
Y'all got any Christmas stories you'd like to share today?
This isn't a Christmas story, but I have to put this in about Grandma Cone. She dipped snuff. And I had never been around people that dipped snuff. You know, when I married Clyde and first time I met her, and I won't go into when I first met her, but Chris was just a little toddler, and she was so pretty, and of course I just thought she was the cutest redhead there ever was with all her curls. And we had gone up to Clyde's mother and daddy's, and Grandma Cone stayed there with her a lot. Now this was Clyde's grandmother. And she sat over by the window, and she had this, like, I don't know, a little bucket or something where she spit in it. Well, Chris wasn't walking then. That's right, she was crawling and trying to get up and stuff. And we left the room for a second. I did, to go get something. And I came back in right away, and there was Chris sitting, and she had gotten into that spittoon, and she had snuff all in that beautiful red hair everywhere. Oh, I was so mad. I was so upset over my baby having snuff all over her. And I'll tell you one more quick story about Grandma Cone. She was a real character. Evelyn and I, that's Clyde's sister, were going swimming, and we were in putting on our bathing suits, and she was on the sleeping porch, Grandma Cone was. And we said, you know, she's really something, and I wonder if she ever takes a really good bath. I bet she doesn't, and she kind of smells. And anyway, we go back out in our bathing suits, and she thought we were terrible wearing bathing suits. We thought we were pretty cute. And anyway, she said, I want to tell you girls something. She said, I bathe, and she said, I wash up as far as possible, down as far as possible, and I wash possible too. So that's a little bit about Grandma Cone. And nobody wanted to be a Grandma Cone, and here I am a Grandma Cone.
No.
But the boys always tell it because they won't ever let me live it down.
There's safety.
We were at our deer lease. We had about 15 to 20 years down at Batesville, Texas, with the Cardwell Ranch. Anyway, I had John, Matt, and Steve with us, and we were in this white, I guess it was, back in those days, what do they call that? Santa had it, you know, we sold it.
Station wagon.
Station wagon, white station wagon. So, anyway, I was giving the boys, I said, hey, you got to be safe, you got to be real careful and safe. And so, when I did, when I saw this deer, I reached down and got my gun, and I must have pulled the trigger myself, and it missed my feet, but it went through the board there, and
the floorboard
of
the car.
and then went to the engine, and it shot out the gas line going to the carburetor. So we had to pick up the phone. In fact, Dick Griffith was on that trip too. He reminded me of it. That's what I thought about it. And so there I was. I told the boys I ought to be so safe.
Teaching them safety.
And then I shoot and shot a hole about this big in the floorboard. So I never lived that one down. But the three boys, John, Matt, and Steve, and of course we had some great times there that we'll never forget. But I was going to tell you one story about my father. My father was 10 years old. He came from a large family there in Nonie. So one morning, about 8 a.m., well, they walked out on the front porch and said, Clyde said that we're all starving to death. And they said, they had about 10 children. And they said that...
They didn't have 10 children.
Oh, they had a whole bunch.
No,
How many?
Okay, there's Della.
Della's not. She was a daughter of Aunt Myrtle.
Well, not Della, but there was just Nonie and Aunt Myrtle, Richard, and your daddy. That's 4 children. And
Merle,
5.
And then also they had 2 that died.
Although I didn't know about
Anyway, there's about 8 of them at least. So anyway, they said that you're going to have to find another place so Daddy said that they hand me a little knapsack of clothes, and he said that you're going to have to find another place because we're all starving to death. And so he said, Mama, I'm not but 10 years old. Where am I going to go? He said, I was crying. And he said, you just have to find your place. You might go see Richard. And Richard lived 15 miles away at Farrah, Texas, where my sister Evelyn was later born there when Mother and Daddy got married. And so he was only 20 years old.
He had to have been over 10 years old because Ruby was there and she remembers when he came to the house.
No, Ruby didn't remember either. Ruby was a baby. Anyway, Ruby was 10 years younger than my daddy, so she was a baby. And so Uncle Richard was only 20, but he already had 1 child and another one on the way. But Ruby was the eldest, and then they had Morris, and then they had Doll, and then Francis and Charles. But anyway, Daddy walked that 15 miles and cried all the way, he said. And he walked up there and Aunt Fanny on the front porch. Uncle Richard, her husband, was 20, but he was already the head of this general store where they worked for Mr. Worthy. And this general store, and only store at Farrah, and all the farmers traded with them, and he bought eggs from them, sold them eggs and farm equipment. But anyway, and Fanny came to the front door, and Daddy says, Clyde, what are you doing here? And he told her the story, and she put her arm around him and said, don't you worry about it, we'll raise you. And they did. That would be, Uncle Richard and Aunt Fanny became his mother and father. And so that was a hard thing to go through for a 10-year-old.
But Ruby said he wasn't 10. She said he was 17.
No, he wasn't. He was 10. Yeah. Anyway, that's the story. But any other stories?
I was thinking, when me and Michael and Andrew, we'd spend a lot of time at Speaks, and I was wondering if you had any stories that you had out at Speaks.
Well, let's see. It Speaks. You could probably tell some better stories than I could.
I bet he could.
Yeah.
I bet he could. They know stories that we don't know.
Yeah. Well,
they're all written on the wall.
A
lot of
I saw some of the stuff.
I know everybody got stuck there because any time it rained, if you weren't out there on that highway, you're going to get stuck. And
we had a lot of fun there, though, too.
You remember it yourself? You remember it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a good one.
How old were you there?
Well, we were like 10. We were young. I mean, definitely younger than 10. Yeah. We were little. I mean, we shouldn't have been running around with guns shooting cans.
No.
But we did. Well, I got one. Me, Lauren, Elizabeth, and Michael. We were in the sleeping quarters there, which were very lovely.
Oh, yeah.
They were top of the line. They were great. Well, so we had Uncle Steve, Uncle Matt, and my dad, but they all snore, as you know.
Yeah.
They snore very loud and hard. So we'd have this. We'd all be me, Elizabeth, and Michael, and I don't know if Lauren was there. We'd all be commentators, and we'd commentate on how loud the snoring. Oh, well, here comes John. Here comes. Oh, it's starting off pretty light. Oh no, there you go. Yeah, and so that was one of the good ones. I mean, we'd see people. We'd always feel like someone was going to come and get us out there because we'd be outside and cars would randomly pull up to the gate.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people went out there that shouldn't have been going out there.
Right.
So they'd come out there sometimes when we were there. But it was a good that lake. There's too many.
I know.
Yeah, it was good. It was a good time.
It was a fun place for all of us.
Oh yeah. Let's see.
One year we had Thanksgiving there. Do you remember that?
No,
Brenda?
I don't remember that.
Y'all were little, and we all decided we're going to have Thanksgiving at Speaks. And we had put a picnic table up. And so, of course, me and we invited all our friends to come to Speaks for Thanksgiving. And I'd cooked everything, and Chris had fixed a lot, and Robin and everybody. Now, Stephanie was new in the family then, so we didn't have the little boys. They had a golden retriever dog.
Yeah.
And so Gene Morgan was invited. He went with us and some other people, but they didn't come because it poured down rain and it was just lightning and thundering, and you couldn't even go outside and eat. And we all had to go in this little shack, and you know what a shack was. And we were just like this, body next to body. And so we'd get the food out and we'd hand a piece to each person, including the dog that was in there with us. And I'll never forget, Eric was there, and Clyde was, so against anybody smoking. And Stephanie was new in the family, and she went out, and I smoked then too. And we all went outside to smoke because we were too crowded in there to smoke. And Eric was little, and we went back in, and Eric said, "Papa, Stephanie smoked." Stephanie smoked. Yeah. And little did we know that Eric had listened to everything everybody said. We thought, well, he's little, he doesn't know anything. But it was really turned out to be an unforgettable Thanksgiving, and we did have fun.
I would imagine.
That was our little speak story.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, when we sold that thing, that Nonie and I gave each one of our children $22,800.
Yeah.
And we got $22,800.
Mm-hmm. We divided it up with the children.
And I know that Chris, Steve, John, and Matt each got $22,800.
Mm-hmm.
That was I'll never forget that at Christmas. We were out at River, and we were so proud we were able to do that and give them that gift. I'll never forget Chris, when she opened up her deal, her check, she screamed, "Oh my God! Oh my God!
Oh, Daddy!
Oh, Daddy! We need it so bad!" Yeah, we were all so happy we could do that.
Oh, we loved doing it. It was so much fun for us.
And one time we gave them $5,000.
Mm-hmm.
A year before that, yeah, we were doing pretty good in those days.
Yeah, well, we have always been givers. Me and Michael always had the most fun sitting there together, just peeking through y'all's gifts.
Christmas.
Well, we always knew right before we opened, we already guessed. We already knew, yeah.
Well, I know, and I used to get tickled later at Elizabeth and Laura, and they'd look and they'd say, "Oh, you got that? Well, I got one too."
Oh yeah, me and Michael always laugh when Papa would get us a gift. It'd be from Walmart, and it'd be a little tank top. I'd get it, and then I go, "Michael, you're next," and sure enough, bam, Michael's got it too. We'd always laugh so hard. Oh, it was good.
I wanted to make it even so that none of you would think, anything. So we tried so hard to make it all. I even put down to the penny on a piece thing what I spent on each child, so that it would be exactly the same for everybody.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, nobody's ever had any complaints, and I believe, I know I do. I still have the chest that I got when y'all lived over on Redbud. There was this chest that y'all gave us.
Oh, yeah, and I had made that. It's made.
Yeah, I still have it and use it to this day.
Well, it's a good one.
It was.
I'm so glad that we had all these great Christmas, because we'll never.
Oh, I am too.
You boys and girls and grandchildren will never forget them. I'll tell you.
No, and
we won't either.
It's gonna be hard to give it to our grandchildren, but we're gonna try.
Yeah.
Those were some big Christmases.
You'll do it.
Tell you about Morris Casey.
Okay.
He was a class act, and well, I don't think there's any more stories there, I don't believe. But Morris Casey was one of the funniest guys that ever lived, and I know that I was choir director in 1948 over at First Baptist Church of Clute, and so I got to enjoy Morris because he just pulled one funny thing after another. What he'd do is like we'd be sitting up there in the choir, and he'd look over and punch me, and then stick his tongue out at me, and then make me laugh, and I'd laugh
more
out.
Than that.
Oh, more than that, yeah. But
anyway,
then one thing about his father-in-law was the Baptist minister.
Yeah.
And of course, He was a little bitty fella, but had a great brother band meter. And you know, like you go to Baptist church, the preacher always stands at the back door, and as you leave, he shakes everybody's hand and says, "Thank you for coming, enjoyed it. So glad you came. We love you." But so Morris had this real strong grip. He could just crush your hand. So what he did one day, he said, "Clyde, you watch what I'm going to do to Brother Van." And so we got up there, and so Brother Van was shaking hands and telling some other people, "We sure thank you for coming." So Morris reached over and got his hand and just squeezed it and put him all the way to the floor.
On his knees, yeah.
Just for a minute. And so he said, "Morris, you crazy thing." And then one day there, Morris and I were sitting on the back row, and so Brother Van was preaching. And so Morris got stood up back there in the back row, and nobody could see him except Brother Van. And Morris went right back to Brother Van while he was preaching. And Brother Van said, "Morris, please leave." Because he laughed out loud himself. And then he turned to all the audience there and said, "Y'all all know Morris, and we don't know what he's going to do next." But we just never knew what he was going to pull, did we, Nonie?
No.
Anyway, Morris could have been alive right today. He became a real bad alcoholic and had a big job at Dow Chemical. And he could have just, no telling what he could still be alive.
He crawled in the bottle.
He crawled in the bottle. And after Irma died in 1978, well, 4 years later, 1982, he died. So Morris has been gone now for, he's been gone for 25 years. And I know that he was a good Christian boy, raised from a good family. But Morris, that wasn't the same person right to the last. He would even pee in his pants and his bed.
Don't tell him.
Yeah. Anyway, I think you got anything else over there that you want?
Yeah, I got. You know, y'all been married for 61 years, going on 62. I wanted to, maybe you could give everybody advice to the camera on how you do that, especially with all those children stealing softballs from backyards and yeah. So how do you do it?
Well, I'll tell you one thing we did. We didn't take our children to church and drop them off. We stayed with them, and we went to Sunday school. We went to church.
We taught Sunday school.
And we raised them, and we made sure they went whether they wanted to go or not. Every Sunday they went to church.
I don't know how good of examples we were, though.
No, but anyway.
So we're not taking credit for that.
But I think
we tried to teach them.
I think that a family prays together, stays together. I think, and that's something we always had prayer in our home, didn't we, Nonie?
We did, and we really communicated. I want to tell you how well we communicated. Speaking of prayer, Clyde liked to go out and play a lot at night, and of course, I always had my little children and babies everywhere.
Here it comes.
And this one night, he had been out way too long. In fact, it was morning and daylight when he came in. And I was in bed asleep. He came in about 2 or 3 in the morning. By then, I was pretty upset because I went through the period of, I hope he's, not dead somewhere. I hope he isn't in an accident. Go through all that, and then you get mad. And then by then, I was mad, and he came in. I was in bed, and I said, "Well, where have you been?" And he kind of bent down by the bed. "Oh, Nonie, it's all right," and he smelled like lots of liquor and everything. I was just out and, couldn't get back, this, that, and the other. And I said, "You're sorry, you're no good." I was so mad, And I said, "You're just no good staying out like this, and here's all the children here, and you shouldn't do this," and blah, blah, blah. And he said, oh, Nonie, let's just pray about it. Get on your knees with me and pray about it. And I hit him as hard as I could. And I said, "I'll not pray with you again." I have prayed with him since, but I had seen, we had all had to go in and pray with Clyde's daddy so much because he drank a lot and got drunk a lot. And so it was a ritual. It had become a ritual at the Cone house. We all went to the front bedroom when Mr. Cone came in from one of his drunks, and we all had to go in there and pray with Mr. Cone. And it just went through my mind, and I thought, we're not doing this at this house. We're not praying. But it is kind of funny, but it is a true story. But Clyde said, I'm afraid to ever pray with her again because she really hit hard.
I also said you're not
That's a
supposed
true
to
story.
hit a man when he's praying.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
I
a
guess
good
that's
lesson.
how we've stayed together. We
Yeah.
communicate.
Right, we communicate. Now you got to communicate too, and there's times whenever you ever, I guess every married couple ever probably when they almost divorced, but if you, long as you communicate and that you can work things out, but when you get where you don't talk, you get further and further apart. So always communicate when you're married.
Even if you do have to slap him.
Right.
Mm.
Is anything else over there that you?
No, it's just go for it. If you got something, say it. If not, we can conclude this session.
Well, I don't want to leave out Teresa.
No.
Okay. Tell about Teresa or I'll cry.
Yeah. Well, what we in 1955, I was still the head of the Marine Department, and we were just going great guns, and I'd already started investing, and I already had a building downtown that we were getting paid for. Tom Brown, he had this white auto there to start with, and then later on he went into auto parts business there. And I'd borrowed money to. That was one of our first debentures, and we were so proud of that. And so Nonie took Steve, Chris, and Teresa to the picture show that day. What we're going to talk about.
Yeah, well, and we were having a barbecue.
Yeah, I was
Banksons
barbecuing
were
out
coming
in the
over.
back, and all of a sudden, Nonie picked up the three children at the picture show and was coming back, and they're at the Methodist Church on Azalea. Well, this woman ran it wasn't a stop sign, but it was a yield sign.
Yeah.
And she hit Nonie broadside. It probably didn't do over a couple $100 worth of damage to the car, but back in those days, you didn't have seat belts, no air conditioning in cars, and the windows were down. And it was in June, which is warm, and so Teresa was standing up in the back seat of the car, and the windows down, and she went through the window and hit the telephone post there at the Methodist Church. Anyway, I was barbecuing, and somebody, I think it was Bob Metcalf, ran down and said, "Clyde, come with me quick." Says, "Nonie's had a wreck." Went up there, and Teresa was laying on the grass there, and we took her to Houston in an ambulance. She lived 3 days and died, and we just never have gotten over it, Brandon, and never will. We still can't ever talk at times without crying. Anyway, later on, about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, this doctor came up to me. I was at a cocktail party in Lake Jackson, and he said, "Clyde, I want to tell you a story." I said, "What is that?" He said, "Well, the day your Teresa was killed," he said, "that I was at this cocktail party at, it was, I forget his name right now, Rube Tracy at this cocktail party, and said that this woman, her name was, what was the name, Nonie? From West Columbia."
I don't know.
And anyway, I can't think of her name right now, but I never will forget. Steele, her last name was Steele, S-T-E-L-E. And she walked out, almost fell to the ground. She was so drunk she couldn't even walk. And back in those days, you didn't have MAD, M-A-D-D, women's deal, and about alcohol. They didn't do testing of any kind. And so she was driving fast, and then she hit Nonie. And so then...
And I had Steve and Chris in the car.
Anyway, he said, I said, "Doc," I said, "I wish you'd never told me that." And I didn't tell Nonie for a long time. And but it just brought back all the whole tragedy again. It's only been about 3 years ago. This fellow told me. I said, "I wish you'd never told me." He said, "Well, it's been on my mind so much, and I always felt a part of it myself, because if I'd have stopped her, the accident wouldn't have happened." I said, "Well, we've all thought if we'd done this, done that, she wouldn't have been killed." But she's only 7 years old, and we just have never gotten over it. And we're looking forward to going to see her in heaven. That's the only hope we have. I pray for faith all the time. myself, because I still have doubts at times, but I know that God's going to take care of, make sure that I get to see her and Nonie and all of us. But that was one of the most horrible things that ever happened to us. I'm getting hoarse.
I didn't want to leave her out, but I cried. So that
Well.
easy. I'm an easy crier.
Well, that's cone fashion. We gotta throw something in there. Gotta make somebody cry.
Right.
Well, appreciate your time and thanks for everything from everybody.
Before we get through here, I want to say we're real proud of you, Brandon.
Yes, we are,
And
Brandon.
that you're going to do great, because like
You've got it
today,
like your dad.
like your father's always you could always depend on your father. He said, I'll be there at 10 o'clock. He's there at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
You weren't there. You weren't going to be here this morning at 8 o'clock, but you called and said it might be 8:10, and you got. And he said, I'll try to get there at 8. And but always stay that way, and you'll make it. But you always be honest, and I know you're going to do well, because you've got your genes of your father, and he is probably ranked one of the greatest real estate men that ever will be. I just no telling what heights he's going to go. I just can't believe every time some of the things he does. And you've got the greatest teacher in the world, and John says I was the greatest teacher in the world, but I don't think I'm going to ever be compared to John, because right now he and Steve have got this great partnership going, and I hope that they never leave. Max Hagan and I had it. We should have never. We'd have owned Brazoria County.
Yeah, well, the lesson, they know the lesson,
Yeah.
and they're not going to forget it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they are unbelievable, and they would never be as good without each other. Never. But they're the greatest team. In fact, I've had several bankers tell me, says, I'll tell you what, I'd hate to go up against that Steve and John Cone. They're going, and just look at the signs now. This new deal downtown is going to be unbelievable. How everywhere you go now, you see Clyde Cone, huge sign.
It is.
And we used to have it that way years ago, but it's going to be unbelievable. And John's got now into the ranching deal. I think that's going to be unbelievable before it's over.
Yeah.
Because whatever John gets into, you can bet your butt he's going to go, and go all the way. And he's smart. And I know you're going to follow in the same footsteps, because you've got that great mind that John has. And I'm just we're proud of you, and we know that, and always stay honest. And that's what your father has always been taught, and he does, and Steve and Matt. And
Matt has a car lot, and that's what he loves.
And he loves that better than anything.
And I think if he does stick with it, he'll do real well.
But I think if he just dwelled strictly on real estate, I think he'd be a tycoon too.
Yeah.
I do too.
Because Matt's got a great mind.
Yeah, he's starting to get the deals going now.
He's
Yeah.
smart.
Yeah, he's got them going right now.
And y'all just.
And we can all thank Chris, our oldest daughter,
Mhm.
for all the boys being so smart, because she certainly did teach them all well.
John said
She
the
was
other
a
day.
born teacher.
Uh-huh.
She
John
really
said the day, if it
was.
hadn't been for Chris, I'd have never passed that salesman.
Yeah, he tells me that one all the time.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
She
She's the
is.
greatest math teacher to ever live.
And she's a great daughter.
Good girl.
Mhm.
And she has a good husband. They have the
Yeah.
greatest love pair I've ever seen in my
They
life.
have a great marriage.
I don't think they've ever had an argument in their life. They just
Well, I
idolize
think
each
they have,
other.
but we never know about it.
Right. Well, anyway, God bless.
Thank you
And
for
thank you
doing
so
this.
much for doing this. And down the road,
We
y'all can
love
show
you.
this to your children, and maybe us before we're gone.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
never forget it. All right, thank you.
Thank